All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving into the world of the Mahavidyas. These are 10 Hindu goddesses who definitely challenge pretty much everything that comes to mind when you think divine feminine.
That's putting it mildly.
We're going deep into their myths, their symbolism, and what makes them so important in Tantric practices. And to guide us, we're using Tantric Visions of the Divine Feminine, the 10 Mahavidyas, by David Kinsley. So get ready for a crash course on who these powerful figures are and why they still matter today.
To understand the Mahavidyas, we have to understand a little bit about Tantra itself. And in Hinduism, Tantra is all about tapping into divine power to achieve spiritual liberation. And it does that often by using practices that really push the boundaries of traditional religion.
And when we say push the boundaries, we're talking about goddesses who are often depicted as, well, downright fierce. I mean, we're talking cremation grounds, skulls, the whole 9 yards. These aren't exactly your typical, gentle, motherly deities.
Exactly. And that's precisely the point. Tantra is about moving beyond those conventional, comfortable images of the divine. It's about delving into those raw, powerful, even unsettling aspects of existence to understand the true nature of reality and the divine.
So how do they do that? What are the tools or practices?
Well, Tantra uses things like mantras, which are sacred sounds, yantras, which are geometric diagrams, and rituals, specifically designed to invoke these goddesses. And really central to all of this is the role of the guru, the spiritual teacher.
So not exactly your typical Sunday service then.
No, not quite. It's about confronting the full spectrum of reality, the light and the shadow, to achieve that spiritual liberation.
Okay, so that brings up, I think, a really big question. If these goddesses are often depicted in these intense, even, intimidating ways, why would anyone choose to worship them?
And that's where it gets really, really interesting. The Mahavidyas, they really challenge our preconceived notions about what feminine power is, what it looks like. They embody this force that's not always nurturing, not always gentle. It's raw, it's destructive, it's disruptive. And that's precisely what makes them so compelling, especially within the Tantric tradition. They offer this path to liberation that doesn't shy away from the intensity of existence.
So instead of just focusing on peace and love, it's about embracing that full spectrum, even those parts that frankly make us a little uncomfortable.
Exactly. And each of these 10 goddesses provides a different lens through which we can understand these very complex realities. Let's start with Kali, for instance. She's often depicted standing on Shiva, holding a severed head, this incredible power to just annihilate ego and illusion.
She sounds intense, to say the least. I mean, there's a reason she's called the Black Goddess.
Oh, absolutely. Kali represents that ultimate reality, that void from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. She devours time itself. It's a powerful reminder of the preciousness of every single moment.
So not just about destruction, then. It's more about destroying the illusions that hold us back, right?
Precisely. She's forcing us to confront the impermanence of everything, challenging us to live authentically in the present moment.
Wow. Talk about a wake-up call. Okay, so we have Kali, the ultimate reality check. Who's next on our list of powerful goddesses?
Let's talk about Tara. Now, she's a fascinating paradox. She's associated with both creation and destruction. And you'll often see her depicted standing on a corpse, a symbol of her power over death. But she's also seen as this compassionate savior.
Wait, hold on. Standing on a corpse, but also a savior? How does that work?
Well, that's the beauty of Tara, you see. She embodies duality. She's a reminder that creation and destruction, they're not separate forces, really. They're intertwined, this continuous cycle, always in motion. It's not about a goddess who's simply good or bad. It's about understanding that life emerges from death. And death, in turn, makes way for new life.
So it's like she's saying, hey, death is just a part of life. Get comfortable with it. And I'm starting to see a theme here with these Mahavidyas, this challenging of those black and white ways of thinking.
Absolutely. And speaking of duality, let's talk about Tripura Sundari, who's also often called Sodasi. Now, she's described as the most beautiful of the Mahavidyas. She embodies desire, allure, but here's the catch. Her true form, it transcends physical appearance entirely. She's this reminder that true beauty, it goes so far beyond just the superficial.
So we're not just talking about outer beauty here, right?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing a deeper, more, profound beauty.
Exactly. Tripura Sundari, she embodies this idea that true beauty, it's about spiritual beauty, inner truth. And that's way more significant than just, these fleeting external appearances. And this is reflected in her mantra. and her yantra, which are central to her worship.
It's fascinating how each of these goddesses, they use such different imagery and symbolism to really get their point across.
Hmm.
We've got skulls, corpses, and now we're talking about beauty and transcendence. It's a lot to take in.
And we're just getting started. Let's move on to Bhuvaneswari, the world mother. She's connected to the five elements, that raw power of sound. Her bija mantra, Krim, which is a seed sound, believed to hold this potent creative energy, it's said to represent creation itself.
Okay, hold on. Back up a second. Bija mantra. Is that like a super-powered mantra or something?
You could say that. In Tantra, these bija mantras, they're seen as these fundamental sounds, and each one carries a specific vibration, a specific energy. And Bhuvaneswari's Hrim, it's particularly potent because it embodies that creative force from which the entire universe arises.
So she's like the ultimate mama, birthing the entire cosmos with a single sound. Intense.
It's a powerful image. And speaking of powerful imagery, let's talk about Chinnamasta. Now, she's typically depicted self-decapitated with her own severed head, like drinking the blood spurting from her neck.
Wait, she cut off her own head? Okay, that's a whole new level of intent. There's got to be a deeper meaning there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Chinnamasta's iconography, it's all about transcendence. It's not meant to be taken literally. Think of it more as a powerful visualization of Kundalini energy, that vital life force, often depicted as a coiled serpent, rising to the crown chakra, leading to spiritual awakening, liberation.
So not about actual decapitation. It's more about like a metaphorical beheading of the ego, right? Like a radical shift in consciousness.
Exactly. Chinnamasta represents that death of the limited self and the awakening to a higher reality. She embodies the courage it takes to confront those deepest fears and desires on the path to spiritual liberation.
Wow, these goddesses are not messing around. They're really pushing us to think outside the box, or maybe even like break the box entirely.
That's the beauty of the Mahavidyas. They constantly challenge our comfort zones, and just when you think you have a handle on things, they throw a curveball your way. Take, for example, Bhairavi. She's associated with destruction, often depicted in terrifying ways, but she's also described as beautiful, nourishing, connected to the earth's abundance.
Hold on, destruction and nourishment, those seem like total opposites. How does that even work?
Remember, Tantra is all about embracing duality, about recognizing that what seem like opposite forces are often deeply intertwined. And Bhairavi, she represents that beautifully. She destroys to create, to make space for new life, new growth. She embodies the concept of Parbrahmasvarapini, that ultimate reality that transcends all dualities.
Okay, so she's not just about wreaking havoc then. She's a force of transformation,
Yeah.
tearing down the old to make way for the new. I'm starting to see that these goddesses aren't just about one thing. They're multifaceted, complex, just like life itself.
Exactly. And speaking of multifaceted, let's talk about Dhumavati. Now, she's the widow goddess, often depicted as this old, disheveled woman, and she represents inauspiciousness. She embodies those anxieties we have as a society: poverty, loneliness, misfortune, all the stuff we usually try to avoid.
A goddess of misfortune. Okay, that's a tough one to wrap my head around. Why would anyone worship a goddess who embodies like all the stuff we try to avoid?
Because Dhumavati, she teaches us this powerful lesson that even in the midst of suffering, even in those dark, difficult places, there's spiritual potential. She reminds us that life isn't always rosy. Challenges, they're inevitable. But even within those challenges, there's an opportunity for growth.
So it's like she's saying, hey, life's going to throw you curveballs. But how you face those challenges, how you navigate that darkness, that's what truly matters.
Precisely. Dhumavati, she teaches us resilience, acceptance, this understanding that even misfortune can be a catalyst for spiritual evolution.
Wow, that's a powerful perspective shift. She's saying, don't be afraid of the darkness, embrace it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Dhumavati challenging our fear of the difficult stuff. Who's next on this roller coaster ride of goddesses?
Let's talk about Bagalamukhi, the paralyzer. Often depicted with a bird's face, holding a club and a tongue, symbolizing her power to just stop anything in its tracks. She's associated with potent magical abilities and the practice of Sava Sadhana.
Okay, hold on. Sava Sadhana, I feel like we've touched on this before, but I need a little refresher. What was that all about?
Right, so Sava Sadhana, it involves rituals that are performed in cremation grounds, often using corpses as a focal point for meditation.
Intense. And Bagalamukhi is connected to this practice. How does that work?
Well, because Bagalamukhi is all about control, controlling speech, controlling enemies, controlling those forces of the universe. And what better way to confront and overcome our fears than by facing, death itself? Savasarhana, while it's intense, it's ultimately about transcending our fear of death, recognizing the impermanence of this physical world.
So it's about staring death in the face and saying, "You don't scare me." That takes some serious courage.
It does. And that's the kind of courage that these Mahavidyas, they inspire. They push us to confront those deepest fears, those limiting beliefs. Now, are you ready to meet another fascinating goddess?
Get me with it. I'm ready for whatever these Mahavidyas throw my way.
All right, then. Let's talk about Matangi. Now, she's connected to the jungle, hunting, the allure of forbidden desires. She's often associated with the Kandalas, the lowest caste in, traditional Hindi society.
Okay, a goddess of the outcasts, the wild thing. She sounds pretty rebellious.
That's one way to put it. Matangi, she challenges those social norms, embraces what's often considered taboo, unacceptable. She embodies that untamed primal energy that I think exists within each of us.
It's like she's saying, forget your rules, your expectations. Let your true nature run wild.
Exactly. Matangi reminds us that true power, it lies in embracing all aspects of ourselves, even those parts that society might deem inappropriate, unacceptable. She encourages us to question those societal norms, to discover our own unique path to liberation.
So she's a goddess for the rule breakers, the free spirits, the ones who aren't afraid to be different. I like her style.
And last but certainly not least, we have Kamala. Now, you might be familiar with her as this goddess of wealth and prosperity, often depicted surrounded by abundance.
Right, I've seen statues of her in Indian restaurants, shops, usually showered in flowers and offerings. But she's one of the Mahavidyas. That seems a little different from the other goddesses we've talked about.
It does, doesn't it? And that's what makes the Mahavidyas so intriguing. They challenge our assumptions about everything, even prosperity. You see, Kamala, within the context of the Mahavidyas, she takes on this more complex role. Yes, she embodies abundance, but she also reminds us that even prosperity has a shadow side.
Okay, so it's not just about accumulating wealth, possessions.
Right.
There's more to it than that.
Exactly. Kamala challenges us to examine our relationship with abundance. What are you truly seeking? What will bring you lasting fulfillment? She reminds us that true prosperity, it encompasses not just material wealth, but also spiritual richness, inner peace, a deep connection to the divine.
Wow, these goddesses just keep getting deeper and deeper. I feel like I've been on this wild ride through the full spectrum of human experience: creation, destruction, beauty, death, abundance, misfortune, you name it. It's a lot to process.
It is a lot, but it's also incredibly enriching. The Mahavidyas, they don't shy away from the complexities of existence. They encourage us to embrace that full spectrum of life, to question our assumptions, and to find our own unique path to liberation.
So where do we go from here? We've met all 10 of these, like, incredibly powerful goddesses, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around what it all means. Why are these Mahavidyas so important, especially within Tantric practices? So we've spent all this time getting to know these goddesses, but I have to admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the why of it all. Why are these Mahavidyas so important in Tantric practice?
Well, you see, it's not just about worshiping deities, in the traditional sense. It's about embodying those powerful principles they represent. The Mahavidyas, they act as these keys, you could say, that help unlock our own hidden potential. They push us to confront those parts of reality and ultimately those parts of ourselves that we often, try to avoid.
So it's like they're holding up this mirror and saying, hey, here's the full picture, no sugarcoating.
Exactly. And one of the biggest lessons they offer is about confronting taboos. These goddesses, with their fierce appearances, their connections to cremation grounds, corpses, all that they force us to acknowledge the darker side of life, death, decay, destruction as part of a larger whole.
Right. It's a theme we've seen over and over again with these goddesses. They definitely don't shy away from the uncomfortable stuff.
And that's key, because by confronting those taboos, we start to dismantle that dualistic thinking that can keep us trapped, that good versus bad, pure versus impure. The Mahavidyas, with their mix of terrifying and benevolent qualities, they show us that true liberation comes from, transcending those limited ways of seeing the world.
So instead of labeling everything, we're learning to hold both the light and the shadow, the beautiful and the terrifying, all at once. That's a big ask.
It is. But the Mahavidyas, they're also about accessing hidden power. They're associated with cities, these supernatural abilities, and the idea in Tantra is that by working with these goddesses, confronting them, understanding them, we can tap into their power for our own spiritual transformation.
Okay, so it's not just about like intellectual understanding. It's about embodying these principles in a way that actually changes us. But how do we even begin to do that? I mean, there's so much symbolism involved.
And that symbolism holds the key. Take, for instance, that recurring motif of corpses and cremation grounds. Now, this isn't about being morbid or macabre. It's about using those images to confront our own fear of death, to remind us of the impermanence of this physical world, and to really motivate us to seek liberation. Remember, savasatana, that practice we discussed.
The rituals and cremation grounds, it seemed pretty extreme at first. But I'm seeing now how it fits into this bigger picture, this idea of confronting our fears and attachments.
Precisely. And then there's the symbolism of, those chopped off heads and skulls. Again, not literal. It's about a radical shift in consciousness, a metaphorical beheading of the ego, just like we saw with Chinnamasta.
Yeah, Chinnamasta definitely left a mark. That imagery really drives home the point that this path is about, complete transformation, not just like a little tweaking around the edges.
Exactly. And finally, we have to address the elephant in the room, the sexuality that's often depicted in Mahavidya, iconography, mythology, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, that was definitely something I noticed. Pretty hard to miss. But it seems a little out of place, given what we've been talking about, spiritual liberation, confronting death, all that.
It might seem that way, but it's actually deeply connected to Tantric philosophy. You see, in Tantra, that explicit sexual imagery, it's not really about eroticism in like the conventional sense. It's more about a symbolic representation of the fundamental creative energy of the universe, the union of Shiva and Shakti, those masculine and feminine principles.
So more about those cosmic forces then,
Yeah.
about the energy that fuels creation itself, not just about, physical desire.
Exactly. And the tantric practitioner, they seek to harness that energy, to channel it for spiritual growth and liberation.
Wow, it's amazing how everything connects. How even the seemingly, I don't know, disturbing or taboo aspects of these goddesses, they have this deeper meaning, a lesson to teach us. This deep dive, it's been intense, I'm not gonna lie, but also incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I've gained this whole new understanding of these powerful goddesses and the traditions they represent.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, so many layers to uncover. But I think what I find truly remarkable is that these goddesses, despite their, intimidating appearances, their connections to death and destruction, they actually offer a very relatable path to liberation.
Relatable, really. I mean, I don't usually hang out in cremation grounds or drink blood.
Well, maybe not literally, but think about it. These goddesses embody those fears, desires, and that urge to transcend limitations that are so common to, well, the human experience. They remind us that we all have the potential for both darkness and light within us.
So it's not about becoming perfect or pure. It's about embracing like the full messiness of being human.
Exactly. And within that messiness, within those dark, challenging places, that's where the potential for incredible growth and transformation lies. The Mahavidyas, they show us that the path to liberation, it isn't about denying or repressing those aspects of ourselves. It's about confronting them, understanding them, and ultimately integrating them into a greater whole.
That's a powerful message. And honestly, I think one that will stay with me long after this deep dive is over. So where do we go from here? What would you say to someone who's been listening to all of this and is thinking, okay, this is fascinating, but what do I do with it now?
Explore. Dive deeper into the individual myths and symbolism of the Mahavidyas. See which goddesses resonate with you, which ones spark your curiosity. You might be surprised at what you discover about yourself and about the universe, in the process.
That's great advice. It's like these goddesses are gateways to a whole new way of seeing the world and ourselves. So, to everyone listening, if you're ready to challenge your assumptions, to embrace the full spectrum of your being, the Mahavidyas, they're waiting to guide you.